I was trying to read this Belgium document, and it tried to translate. Like mostly the AI is pretty good at translating. Actually, I used the different AIs, but it translated one thing as like it said something like, "Oh, the road should be covered with slime," and I was like, "I don't think that's slime that you mean. I think you mean something else."
Uh, I know there's the oil that comes up after it rains, but were they meaning like a treatment?
Yeah, no, this was like a measure. They said like, "Oh, in this measure, we covered the road with slime," and I was like, "No, actually, I don't think it was slime. I think they said mucus. That's what they said."
Oh shit.
So they said they should cover the road with mucus, and I thought it's probably not the right translation then.
You see somebody out there with a broom and like a bucket of whale blubber.
Yeah, that was it. I think maybe we could do. I would send to Belgium and ask, "Do you do like the mucus covered roads?" You can adopt it as well.
Oh
Be like, "This is
man.
European one."
They're just like swabbing cow noses.
Yeah.
What animal produces the most mucus?
Hmm. You should bioengineer something, and then it will produce extra mucus,
Oh,
just
yes.
like standing with its mouth open, like. "Bleh." It's like from the nose, right? I don't even know. Oh, it's like
Mhm.
kind of from the throat. Oh,
I bet you hippos have a lot.
oh yeah, probably.
I don't know why,
But
but elephants seem like they'd be kind of dry.
mm,
But
I
they do
mean,
have
it
that big
also
long trunk.
yeah, a lot of mucus in the trunk. But it also depends on, do you want the most mucus per body weight? So then the hippos are rather large. Maybe it's better to have
Hmm.
like a little mouse or something.
Oh, because you have to feed it less, like smaller
Yeah,
cages.
per mucus.
Hmm. That would be a great study. Which animal has the most mucus? What's the easiest to bioengineer? In the future, you just have a vat.
Oh yeah, that produces the mucus.
Welcome back to the Great and Secret Knowledge. I'm Jeff, and with me, as always, when we talk about the Vor Game, Sophia.
Hey, hey.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Uh, we were talking a little bit about traffic planning, mucus on roads, AI translations. Um, I think those are all good warm ups. Maybe they'll come up in the course of our discussion. I also talked about my dad going into surgery today. I was like warning Sophia I might have to reschedule in case he calls, but no call yet. I didn't go visit him when he first went in the hospital before he found out he had to do surgery. So I feel kind of like obligated to rush over there.
Is it far away?
No, it's like 5 minutes away, the
Oh,
hospital he
really?
got moved to.
That's at least like I don't know, it feels in the circumstances lucky. That's so close by.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I don't even have to cross the bridge to go. I don't have to pay a toll or anything.
Mm. I don't even have any hospital that close. Now I feel jealous. No, just kidding.
Yeah, I got two actually. Um, well, that's that news. Hopefully, he'll be fine. He's pretty old, but I told my friends, and they were like, "Well, they're really high success rate, like 90%." And I'm just thinking that sounds high, but it's like 1 out of 10 chance of death seems a little too high on its own.
Mm.
Oh boy. Well, stay tuned for next time, listener. Maybe I'll have some good news. Let's get into this very fun couple of chapters. Miles has been captured by the notorious Cavillo. Metzoff and Cavillo were together, if you remember, with Miles. They're a couple guards, and Metzoff is like, "Get this Barry Yarn out of sight." So Cavillo says, "Who sent him then?" Cavillo stared anew at Miles, her lip in a dubious curl. "God," Metzoff avowed fervently. "God has delivered him into my hand." Metzoff, that cheerful, was an unusual and alarming sight. Even Cavillo raised her brows.
He's like, what's going on? But he says God, but I don't feel like Barry Aaron's doesn't really talk about God much. They
Yeah, the
seem
way
quite
Miles talks
atheists.
about that, yeah, they've been more or less atheists forever, since the time of isolation, at least. They have talked about the Greekies, but no discussion of like Greek Orthodox religion. So
Yeah,
maybe
no
they all
discussion
died
about,
out.
and yeah, there's not really been discussed any other religion, but I don't know. It could just be, I was gonna say it could be a figure of speech, but this seems pretty intentional. It's not like someone just be like, oh my God, he's like, God did this. Maybe they just have a kind of a religion, but it's a little bit more personal, maybe. I'm not sure.
Yeah, like more deist, like Washington or Jefferson or something. Like they're not a part of any particular religious tradition, but they still believe in destiny or the afterlife or a benevolent God of some kind.
I don't get it. Like they did that, or is it like I don't understand your
Oh, I just mean
reference?
some people kind of believe God is like the great watchmaker, like he put things in motion, but isn't necessarily involved in every little thing.
Oh yeah, I guess it could be.
Didn't have a son that performed miracles.
Mm. It would have been interesting if there was all these different religions in this world, but I think maybe it
We
might have
didn't
been
even
too
ask her.
complicated. Yeah, we should have asked why the no religions.
There was a bunch of stuff when I started thinking about the other books that we didn't cover.
It's
Um,
hard to cover everything. It's like could
yeah.
go into all these different details, like, oh, why isn't there this kind of plant in this place or something?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, like the different climates on different planets. That could have been an
Mhm.
interesting subject. Oh, the terraforming battle that happens on Barrier. I think that's been mentioned in this one.
Oh yeah. Or wait, maybe I'm mixing up with another one.
Or maybe we talked about it offline.
No, I think they do mention it because they talk about like nice looking trees, and then they say that some of the trees are earth plants and some are very barren ones who doesn't turn color.
They definitely or she definitely gets into it more in Mountains of Morning,
Mm.
which listener is in the Borders of Infinity omnibus. So look for that. Great audio book if that's the way to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, Cavillo raised her brows. Miles thinks that Metzoff might not recognize Gregor. He calls him Miles's bodyguard. And then Gregor goes and spoils it by talking. And Metsov is like, holy shit, that's the fucking emperor. So he asks Gregor where his security is.
Yeah, I just want to say that it's I don't know, it's funny. Just I guess I will have more to say about it when we get further into the scene.
Sure.
Okay, so when he asked this, you're looking at it, Miles mourned. Not f I don't know, what is Gregor's voice? I feel like I want to be impressive but also not impressive. So I don't know. I will just do it without any
I would
specific.
say with any acting performance, what I find is posture helps, but also keeping in mind what they think about, which is I'm the most important person in this room. Every word I say is important because it could sway everyone's opinions. It could get people killed. Like everything's important, even if you toss off a line.
Now I feel too much pressure.
that's just my philosophy. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I will just say it and then I will get into it later. Maybe I'll find the voice. Not far behind, I imagine. Gregor essayed. No, essayed, sorry. Gregor essayed, cool. Let us go away and they will not trouble you.
And us there and our are capitalized.
Mm.
So I don't know if that means he puts emphasis on it or just that it's notable because he's an emperor. So that's probably why he went plural there. So Miles asks why Metsov is there. He said he had to get work because they took away his pension, Barryar. Miles is intrigued as to why Metsov would work for a woman. And he notices that she calls him darling because he was so anti-woman soldier earlier in the book.
Yeah.
So Cavillo is getting insistent. Metsov is getting all poetic. He's getting all juiced up. And she's like, tell me what the hell's going on. Gregor is being all imperial. He's letting Metsov know that he's terribly wrong. I'm not sure what I meant there. Maybe just that he's making a big mistake.
Yeah, probably.
And Metsov decides they should take them somewhere secret. Cavillo says take him to medical and then the brig, and Metsov disagrees with both of those ideas. And Miles is thinking he doesn't want to jail Gregor. And then Metsov asks for Gregor's parole, which is like a thing in battle. You can take a soldier and then you're required to treat him a certain way. Metsov turned to Gregor and said with perfect seriousness, "May I have your parole, sire? Sir?" "What?" cried Cavillo. "Have you stripped a gear, Stannis?" "A parole," Gregor noted gravely, "is a promise given between honorable enemies. Your honor I am willing to assume, but are you thus declaring yourself our enemy?" Again, our is capitalized. Metsov says that he may be an enemy of his advisors, clearly meaning Miles. He wants no recordings. Cavillo agrees, and they go to Metsov's cabin. He hits Miles with a tangle field and gives Gregor his own desk chair to sit in.
It's so many of these when people are saying if they're recorded or not. And if I had a ship, I would record everyone all the time, regardless of what they thought. Wouldn't you? I mean, if you were Cavillo.
Cavillo, for sure. She wants blackmail info on everyone, right? She's always looking for leverage. Metsov, however, understands the very sensitive political implications of everything that's done with an emperor.
Mm,
And
that's
there's just
true.
things you don't do. You don't get on record intimidating the emperor or having a gun out in front of the emperor. You know what I mean? Like there's just things that aren't done.
Yeah, I agree. I just mean that I feel like Cavillo has a recording, even though Metsov said don't record. It's like Cavillo is behind, like, do record as usual.
Yeah, I picture like she's got bugs like all over the room in every light fixture, little statues,
Mm.
like a Garfield alarm clock with a camera in the eye or something. So Metsov,
Probably.
let's see, he won't draw a weapon in Gregor's presence, Miles thinks, but Cavillo keeps hers out. We're alone now, Stannis, Cavillo said in a sarcastic lilt. Would you kindly explain this insanity? And it had better be good. Oh, yes. That, he pointed to Miles, is Lord Miles Vorkosigan, the son of the Prime Minister of Barrayar. Admiral Errol Vorkosigan. I trust you've heard of him. Cavillo's brows lowered. What was he doing on Paul 6 in the guise of a bait and gun runner then? Metsov says that Miles was supposedly in detention, and then he drops the big bomb. Gregor is the Emperor of Barrayar, and Cavillo is stunned.
What's his worth? What's his worth to them? Or for that matter, to the highest bidder? Gregor smiled at her. I'm war man. In a sense, the war. Risk in service is the warish trade. I wouldn't assume my value was infinite, if I were you. Gregor's complaint had some truth to it, Miles thought. When he wasn't being the emperor, he seemed hardly anyone at all, but he sure did the role well. An opportunity, yes, said Metsov. But if you create an enemy, oh, sorry, I didn't know where it was stopping.
Oh, yeah, that's the end. But if we create an enemy we can't handle,
Ah,
dot, dot, dot. Or in this
hmm,
case, what's that extra long dash called? Like M
I'm not sure.
dash.
Ah, okay,
Maybe
if you say
called
so.
something different in Sweden. So Miles counsels that they help him get Gregor back to Barrayar safely. He says that would be the honorable decision. And Metsov mutters, "But what are they doing here? And where's the snake Ilian? I want the mutant in any case. Damn, it must be played boldly or not at all."
I think this
So,
is
go ahead.
no, this is thinking later on. Camilla says that she finds him amusing. Maybe this is what she meant. He's just like having monologues, like "Arr, arr, arr."
Yeah, he's like a semi Bond villain.
Oh yeah, totally.
Like this is his villain era.
I think it could be a Bond villain, but it's not maybe elegant enough. I feel like they are a little bit
Mm-hmm.
suave.
Yeah, he's like an elevated odd job. If you've seen Goldfinger, he's
Oh yeah. Hmm.
Goldfinger's right hand man. Metsov complains about his treatment by Barrayar, then says to send them to the brig. And Cavillo objects. She says we'll keep Gregor in comfort and send Miles to the brig. Gregor says to call him Greg. As they go to the brig, Miles assesses what kind of ship they're in. Then he arrives. They bring the freighter captain out, and Miles is like, "You should demand to see your family in the flesh." Oh, because they're holding his family as leverage.
Mm.
The captain does so, and he demands it. Cavillo holds firm, however. As the freighter captain turned, torn between resistance and eagerness, Cavillo motioned the guard to open distance from his prisoner. He fell away, brows rising in question. Cavillo glanced at Miles and smiled very sourly, as if to say, "All right, smartass, watch me." In a cold, smooth motion, Cavillo flipped open her left side holster seal, brought up a nerve disruptor, took careful aim, and fried the back of the captain's head. He convulsed once and dropped, dead before he hit the deck. She walked over and pensively prodded the body with the pointed toe of her boot, then glanced up at Miles, whose jaw was gaping open. "You will keep your mouth shut next time, won't you, little man?" Ugh. That's always rough when you say some cool shit to a villain and it gets somebody killed.
Yeah, cold-blooded.
He feels terrible. And then he realizes she must have been the one that killed Liga and that this guy's death is his fault. She has the memory of their meet with Gregor scrubbed. Is that just like the recording from the cargo bay or whatever?
No, it's because since he was the only witness, by killing him, no one knows that
Yes.
Gregor came on board.
So he orders Miles into cell 13, and Miles asks why she's using Metsov. And then he feels kind of ill thinking about the two of them getting it on. She admits she needs a ground commander.
Yeah, and Miles says, "Why do you need a ground commander for a space place?" "Well then," she smiled sweetly, "he amuses me." That was supposed to have been the first answer. "No counting for taste," Miles muttered inanely, careful not to be heard. Should he warn her about Metsov? On the second thought, should he warn Metsov about her?
I mean, what's he going to tell Metsov? She's out here just killing fools left and right? He probably knows. Well, what do you think? Do you think he knows that she's dishonorable?
I think it's funny that both of them are like, "Oh, I will betray the other," when they talk to Miles. So I feel like they both feel like they are the smarter one, and if they learn that the other one is trying to betray them, they're just thinking that, yeah, but I will betray them first.
Metsov is definitely underestimating her.
Mm.
I don't know about the other way around. So Miles realizes he's got nothing to do in there. No books, no vids, not much room to move around. They give him a terrible ration bar for his food, and he wonders what kind of food Gregor is getting. And that he figures she surely blocked them from getting to the Barryaran consulate, so that was her first plan, I guess. And then Metsov enters. He calls off the guard and disses Miles' ability to fight at all. And then Miles starts needling him. And I was thinking, this is a classic prisoner tactic to like pit your captors against each other. And so he's kind of like trying to drive a wedge between the two of them.
Yeah.
"Well, well," said Metsov, his mouth twisting. "What a turn of fate." "I thought you'd be dining with the Emperor," said Miles. "Commander Cavillo, being female, can get a little scattered under stress. When she calms down again, she'll see the need for my expertise in Barryaran matters," said Metsov in measured tones. "In other words, you weren't invited. You left the Emperor alone with her? Gregor, watch your step." Ugh. Man. Most important person in your society with this psychopathic murderer.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's like, oh, but Gregor can't hurt him. He's too soft from his upbringing. or
Mm-hmm.
hurt her. I mean,
Yeah. So Metsov wants to know what's really going on here. Miles considers keeping his mouth shut, but figures it doesn't matter. They're going to fast pen to him probably anyway. So Metsov wants to know why he was on Aslan Station. Miles says you can't interrogate the freighter captain because Cavillo killed him. Metsov says that makes sense because it got rid of the only witness to Miles's current location. And Miles reckons that it's also kind of dumb because now they can't find out where he came from, or at least, for sure. So Metsov thinks Miles has Gregor as part of some plot.
Miles groaned. Oh, of course. He curled his tongue. No, he curled his indignation. Sorry, I'm getting all messed up tonight.
I
And
guess he uncurled like he's sitting up or something.
Oh yeah, it's like he uncurled in his indignation. So I guess he was curled up. And what sane, or insane for that matter, chain of conspiracy do you imagine accounts for our arrival here? Alone, from Aslan. I mean, I know what it really was. I lived it. But what does it look like? To a professional paranoid, that is. I just love to hear it.
So Miles is just exasperated by this bullshit. Metsov says it could be a secret, dishonorable diplomatic mission, or perhaps even Miles thinks he can become emperor.
Everyone who is not in line for the throne keep thinking that everyone else is trying to be the emperor.
Oh yeah, like it looks like a cushy gig from the outside, but it's
Yeah.
really a trap in a way.
Mm.
Like you're everyone's servant, sort of. It scarcely matters. The medical staff will squeeze out your secrets as soon as Cavillo gives the go-ahead. In a way, it's a shame Fast Penta was ever invented. I'd enjoy breaking every bone in your body till you talked. Or screamed. You won't be able to hide behind your father's, he grinned briefly, skirts out here, Vorkosigan. He grew thoughtful. Maybe I will anyway. One bone a day for as long as they last. And I didn't put it here, but I think he says like 260 or 206 bones in the human body. If he lets me live for 260 days, surely Barriar will catch up with him.
Yeah, the silver lining.
But it makes him wonder why Metsov is wasting his time on Miles.
His lover threw him out, so he felt lonely and strange and wanted someone familiar to talk to, even a familiar enemy. It was weirdly understandable. Except for the Khmer invasion, Metsov had probably never set foot off Barrier in his life. A life spent mostly in the constrained, ordered, predictable world within a world of the imperial military. Now the rigid man was adrift and faced with more free will choices than he'd ever imagined. God, the maniac's homesick. Chilling insight.
Oh, man. I like when she gets into the really short sentences or like even just little phrases. Chilling insight. It's almost like she's meta commenting on her own writing or whatever.
Yeah, that's true.
Stephen Moffat does this sometimes in his TV writing. He's like, "Brilliant, you're so smart," kind of thing, and it's like, didn't you write these words? So Miles. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say just that it's like when, for example, in a TV show or something, they will be like, "Oh, this person wrote the most perfect speech," and then they have to actually perform the speech, and it's like, "Is it the most perfect speech?" But usually they cut away, so you don't have to hear the whole one.
Oh yeah, and it's also kind of like when there's a band in a movie or TV show, and there's two choices. Both of them are bad. They can either write music specifically for the show, which is almost never going to be as good as like a pop song that was crafted over a particular period of time with like excellent writers or whatever. It's a guy that doesn't write music writing the lyrics, like or they get a good band, and then because they need to save money they can't use the actual music, so you're screwed either way. This happened with the Beatles on Doctor Who this season, or this past season. They have John Lennon and Paul McCartney in the episode, but they don't play any Lennon and McCartney songs. It's very odd.
That is weird.
So Miles praises Metzoff for landing this cushy gig with the super hot lady. He asks how much Metzoff thinks he matters. And Metzoff says he'll soon be running things, like inside of 6 months. And then Miles is like, are we being recorded? And he says, not at the moment.
That he knows of.
Exactly. Garfield's eyes come open. Miles asks if Cavillo is planning to retire. He says she could have an accident, or he could finger her for the murder. Cavillo even told him about it in bed or something. Like, is he talking about the freighter captain's murder or like Liga?
I think he's talking about Liga's murder, right?
Okay,
because,
back on Pole.
Yeah, because that's the one that's been missed. We don't know that the freighter captain, maybe they don't even know that he was killed.
Yeah, I guess it just happened a few days ago, or a day ago. That was no boast. That was a warning, dunderhead. Miles's eyes nearly crossed, imagining pillow talk between Metzoff and Cavillo. You two must have a lot in common. No wonder you get on so well. Metzoff's amusement thinned. I have nothing in common with that mercenary slut. I was an imperial officer. Metzoff glowered. 35 years, and they wasted me. Well, they'll discover their mistake. Ominous. Metzoff complains about being dumped by the military, and then he asks if Miles has anything else to say. And Miles says, yeah, get Gregor to the embassy, or at least tell someone he's here. And then Miles speculates as to why Cavillo would need Metzoff, since he's just a ground troops commander, not a space guy. He rattles through all the various details, and he can't make sense of it. Miles thinks about Gregor then, and how much experience he's had with women.
Was Gregor being tortured? Being seduced? Visions of Cavillo/Livia New's dramatic red evening wear undulated in Miles' mind's eye. Was Gregor having a wonderful time? Miles thought Gregor had little more experience with women than he had, but he'd been out of touch with the Emperor these last years. For all he knew, Gregor was keeping a harem now. No, that couldn't be. Or Ivan would have picked up the scent and commented. At length, how susceptible? I can't say it. Susceptible. Susceptible was Gregor to a very old-fashioned form of mind control. This is good practice for me. I get to read out loud in my second language.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Yeah, so a very old-fashioned form of mind control. This is often a trope of women in fiction, but usually written by men. But yeah, women can wrap a man around her fingers, so they say. But I wonder if it ever happens in the reverse, like with it's probably like a really hot dude.
They did. There was one. Who's that author who wrote The Red Rising? Pierce Brown, I think. he wrote this scene where the guys were like coming and pretending to parlay, and they were like, "We have to clean up before so that we look nice," you know. And then the girls was just like, "Oh, I don't know, we should trust them because they looked hot."
So Miles is trying to figure out how much time has passed because he's had like 3 meals. He's like, is that really a day, or are they fucking with time? He's exercising as much as he can, basically just pacing around. And he says it's only succeeding in getting him stinky and dizzy. So he wonders if they're tricking him about the time to soften him up, which it's a common tactic in nowadays. You know, keep somebody lights on for hours and hours and then turn them off. There's this great episode of Babylon 5 where a character is like being interrogated like that by some intelligence agency, and they make him think it's breakfast time, and then like maybe dinner time 10 minutes later. It's like really messed up. So it's a common tactic now, but probably not after Fast Penta was developed.
Is this the time when he tries to like macrame a help message?
Yeah, I skipped that bit, but yeah, he tries to like tie green threads together from his silk shirt.
But does that mean, is it like a Morse code, or is it actually making letters?
Well, he said he was trying to write help, but
Yeah.
yeah, Morse code would have been more sensible. Yeah,
But I thought maybe
he
it's
could have
in
done
Morse
a
code.
line, and then tie is a short. And you know what I mean? Help, yeah. SOS is like dat dash dash dot dash dash or something like that.
3 of each, yeah, or like three for S, 3 for O.
Yeah.
Really long for S. But I guess the macrame is not the same as just tying Morse code knots. So it's probably, he was trying to do the letters, right?
It's macrame? Is that where you glue threads onto something?
No, I was looking it up. It's some kind of sailor art. So you make knots to make this kind of two-dimensional pictures.
Oh, interesting. So maybe it was Morse code. So Cavillo shows up and she notices Miles' busted appearance. Lord Vorkosigan, she cocked her head, interrupting herself aside. You don't look at all well. Solitary confinement doesn't suit me. His disused voice. Oh, wait, I gotta read that. Solitary confinement doesn't suit me. His disused voice came out raspy, and he had to stop to clear his throat. Perhaps a library viewer, his brain grated into gear. Or better, an exercise period. Which would help him get out of the cell and in contact with subornable humans. My medical problems compel me to a self-disciplined lifestyle, if they're not to flare up and impede me. I definitely need an exercise period, or I'm going to get really sick. Cavillo then asks about Miles's mother, Cordelia, trying to figure out how Barryar accepted a Baton woman into their aristocracy.
I can read this one. But I just want to comment that he was all this time in the cell and no singing at all. Like, I think that's obligatory if you're alone in a cell. That's the best way to pass the time.
It's also a way to find out if there are other people in the cells near you.
Oh yeah, if they start banging.
Yeah, it could be annoying or whatever.
And like if they're, for example, monitoring or something, it would also be annoying to the monitors because they're just like singing and it records it all or something.
Especially really annoying songs.
Yeah, and they could be like silly songs about, I don't know, making them up about mezzo or something.
Ooh,
Okay.
I like that.
Let's
I wasn't
see.
sure where to start this quote. Do what you like. Maybe
I just want to see what it's even about. Let's see.
So he's talking about Cordelia. I think I missed the
Oh yeah, I think you didn't have the whole thing.
the first part. Let me
I can paraphrase. It was something about her. She was even leading troops a few times when my father couldn't be at two places at once, and had been personally responsible for the 5-year-old emperor in hiding safety, more successfully than her son was doing so far for the 25-year-old Gregor. Total screw up was the phrase that sprang to mind, actually. Nobody's messed with her since. We missed the first part, but it's basically he's talking about, she's asking about Miles's mother, and like you said, trying to see if they had accepted a Baton woman if it was a problem, and he talked about her military prowess.
Yeah, in the book Barrier, we see well, I guess the first time is in Shards of Honor, where she proves her military mettle. And then on Barrier, she does another series of events that really impresses everyone. All the insiders, at least.
Yeah. But was Barrier published before or after this book originally?
I was looking at the numbers. I think Barrier came after this one.
That must
but
be
it's earlier in the chronology.
Yeah. That must have been very funny if you read this one and then you're like, oh, now you get the prequel.
Yeah. Yeah. So Cavillo says that Gregor is amusing. He says, how is Gregor? Quite amusing. Gregor the lugubrious, amusing? But then, if it matched the rest of her personality, Cavillo's sense of humor was probably vile. I meant his health. So it turns out that she's been giving Miles these shitty ration bars. And I had to wonder, like, is she giving them to him on purpose? And she was shocked, supposedly. She pledges to get him better food. And then she says she's been protecting Gregor from the Vervani secret police.
Miles blinked. Do the Vervana have a secret police as such? Close enough, Cavillo shrugged. Barrier, of course, definitely does. Stannis seemed quite worried about them. They must be very embarrassed back in ImpSec to have so thoroughly mislaid their charge. I fear their reputation is exaggerated. Not quiet. I'm ImpSec and I know where Gregor is, so technically ImpSec is right on top of the situation. Miles wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. And that's him thinking it, by the way. I must do my
so he says
thinking
right on
Miles
top.
voice.
So he's like, ImpSec is right on top of the situation. Or right under it. It's just so silly that, like, he's the only guy from ImpSec protecting Gregor, and he's in a cell. So he asks, why is he still being held? And she says, this is ridiculous, that it's to protect him from Metsov. She's decided to cut him loose. For disloyalty? Not at all. Disloyalty can be very useful at times, under proper management. But the overall strategic situation may be about to change drastically. Unimaginably. And after all the time I wasted cultivating him, too. I hope all Barriarans are not so tedious as Stannis.
It would be funny if someone had recorded each of them, and then they would, like, play them to each other. Isn't that a plot point on some movie where they're like, oh wait, it's in a book I read as a child with this, what is it called now? Artemis Fowl, that book. Then they fight because of it.
I dropped my pen. Yeah, that's that happens sometimes with cops in cop shows or books or whatever. I don't know if it's like necessarily allowed.
You mean for that they record the witnesses, or
that they play audio of another person to someone while they're in interrogation?
Oh yeah. But I guess I was thinking about this. Yeah, I was thinking about this in terms of these villains, and they play like villain monologues to each other.
So it seems like Gregor has been telling her that he ran away to escape a proposed marriage. And Miles explains that he doesn't have an heir. So his
Yeah, and first he's
advisors. Go
yeah,
ahead.
but it's funny also that he's surprised. He's like, "Oh, really?" He said that, and then he realized, "Oh, maybe this is a cover story. I have to agree with it." So
Oh,
that's
yeah,
when he
totally.
explains the lack of an heir.
Yeah, he's in that weird position prisoners are in where, like, they don't know exactly what story their accomplice told the cops or whoever. So he's got
Mm.
to, like, play it the way he thinks Gregor might play it. So it's like
Yeah,
all
keep it a
based
little
on
bit
how well he
open,
knows him.
like an improv actor, right? It's like
Yeah.
yes, and so Cavillo says, so his advisors would be glad to see him marry. Overjoyed, I expect. Miles's unease at this turn of the conversation bloomed into a sudden light, like the flash before the shockwave. Commander Cavillo, you're not imagining that you could make yourself Empress of Barriar, are you? Her smile grew sharp. Of course I couldn't, but Greg could.
Cavilla, you nasty. So Miles says she doesn't understand Barriar. He asks about the freighter captain and his wife and child. And she's like, he was a traitor, he needed to be executed. And he's like, well, then where was the trial? A Barriaran arguing legalities? How strange. And what happened to his family? She'd had a moment to think, blasted. The tedious Vervani demanded their release. Naturally, I didn't want him to know they were out of my hands, or I'd lose my only hold on his actions at a distance. Lie or truth, no way to tell. But she backpedals from her mistake. She let establishing her dominance through terror rule her reactions before she was sure of her ground. Because she was unsure of her ground, I know the look that was on her face. Homicidal paranoids are as familiar as breakfast. I had one for a bodyguard for 17 years. And I think he's mentioned Bothari a few times in this book, but that's who he's talking about. Elena's dad.
Mm.
So he decides to play it cool. He compliments her courage in carrying out the execution herself, or the honor, or whatever. It was worded a little differently. And then she mentions the prisoner's dilemma, and it reminded me of our interview with Lois Bujold the other day. She was talking about the naming of the Vor Game, and I pointed out this little bit.
I'll leave you now to think about the advantages of cooperation. You're theoretically familiar with the mathematics of the prisoner's dilemma, I hope. It will be an interesting test of your wits to see if you can connect theory with practice.
So, for folks that don't know what the prisoner's dilemma, I don't know it intimately enough to give like a good explanation. But essentially, it's a thought experiment where two people are separated, and if they both agree to do the right thing, they'll achieve it. If they both agree to do the wrong thing, they'll fail. But if one of them chooses the right thing and one chooses the wrong thing, the one that chose the wrong thing wins, and the one who chose the right thing loses.
Mm.
So it's like a way to work out what are people most likely to do in this situation. And so in the simulations they've done, or maybe they've done actual testing, they found that more often than not, the participants chose the bad move. It's statistically slightly more likely to give you the win.
Yeah, it's like with the prisoner, the idea is like, do you betray the other prisoner or not? But in reality, it's not as common, because there are systems to keep people from winning in the prisoner's dilemma, from betraying each other, such as, killing someone that betrays the other one.
Oh, right. In the world of, like, say, crime and the
Yeah,
American justice
with
system, there's a
prisoners.
sort of there's the, like, loose concept of the honor among thieves, but then more importantly, it's the snitches get stitches. You know, if you turn on your homies, they're gonna put a hit out on you, or, like, come back once they
Mm,
get out.
yeah, and I find that often like this with all these different theoretical scenarios is that in reality people organize to make sense of it. It's kind of like when the tragedy of the commons. That's also not a thing because in real life people would organize to take care of it so that there was no tragedy. But
Yes,
that's a tangent.
psychological study. Well, I like this tangent. Psychological studies of animals have found that they're much more altruistic and group oriented than we originally thought. They're almost like a lot of, like, especially herd animals are like democratic.
Hmm.
If more than one half of them turn in one direction, the whole group will most likely go in that direction. Um, that's the red-tailed deer study.
Hmm.
But, like, birds do it. That's how they can maintain those, like, wild flocks, if you've ever seen them wheeling about,
Oh, yeah.
sparrows or swallows.
Hmm. Keeping like to the side bird. But what do you think Cavilla means here with the prisoner's dilemma? Like, what is the dilemma? If who would betray who? Yeah, I don't know. It's just him and Gregor. Is the dilemma between them?
I think she's saying you should do the right thing here and help me out, even though that would be a betrayal of the emperor, operational security, because chances are he's selling you out at the same time, right?
Hmm. Oh yeah, I guess. So she wants him to betray Gregor by giving like flirting tips, or I don't know what does she want him to
Whatever,
betray it?
just telling her the information she wants to know, I think.
Yeah. But then
Whatever will
and then
help
she's
her.
saying, okay, so Gregor is gonna betray you by giving, I don't know. It just seems a little bit. I understand what she wants with Gregor, but I don't feel like she has really any use to get any info or something on Miles. I guess it's like maybe she finds out why Metso hates him so much and if she should give him to him.
I mean, just in the theoretical abstract, like, two prisoners interrogations, you know, so we don't really need to know what Gregor would say that would hurt Miles or sell him out in any way. But from Cavillo's perspective, they both might have different information, and she needs all of it. So she's pumping Gregor for info over here, however that process is going.
Yeah. I just trying to figure out the dilemma, like what is what does Miles have to lose from Gregor talking? I feel like all of it's only Gregor's loss if they find out more.
Yeah, I mean, he is super loyal to Gregor, so Gregor could say whatever, and it's his prerogative. Like, it doesn't matter. Maybe he could
Mm.
give away Miles's cover as Naismith.
Oh yeah, that's true. That makes sense actually. He could give information that is relevant.
Whereas Cavillo doesn't actually know how close they are. Do they really trust each other? How much Miles cares about Gregor? Like, she has no idea about any of that stuff.
That's true. They don't know at all like about the familiar. At least Metso didn't mention it. He just said that this guy is this person, this guy is this other person. I guess they know that he's close in line for the Imperium.
Yeah, but maybe just most people don't know that they're, like, kind of surrogate brothers,
Mm,
raised kind of around each other, even though Gregor is 5 years older.
yeah.
So Miles is racking his brain, trying to figure out a good plan of action. What weapon was a good ImpSec man to use in the face of this personal assault on Gregor? Try to seduce her back? To sacrifice himself for the Emperor by flinging himself on Cavillo had about as much appeal as belly smothering a live sonic grenade. Besides, he doubted he could work it. The door slid closed, eclipsing her scimitar's smile. Too late, he raised a hand to remind her of her promise to change his rations. I love that line, eclipsing her scimitar's smile.
I'm not sure what a scimitar is. Is it a sword?
It is a sword. It's curved.
Ah, okay.
So, like a smile. But because it's a sword, right, it starts out straight and then curves up on one end.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's kind of a smirk.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like kind of a tight-lipped smirk, maybe.
Yeah, and eclipsing it. That's a good image. So he starts getting really tasty meals. He gets new clothes, toiletries, and I was thinking he should file down that toothbrush to make a shank.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's not
Except he's
industrious
so
enough.
weak, like anybody could break his bones, so he'd have to shank them in the neck, like perfectly, He couldn't just poke him in the side a few times.
No, that's true. And I don't know how, like, could you kill someone instantly? I guess like maybe if you stuck them in the eye, but I don't know.
As
Be
far as
very
I know, the
far in.
only way to kill someone instantly is to, go deep into their brain or into their heart. Everything else takes a while.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I guess rip out their entire
Yeah,
jugular vein or whatever.
I mean, yeah, sure. If you like incapacitate them totally, then it's also then they don't need to be dead right away. But it's just like you said, it's very hard for him to hurt someone without being more hurt himself.
Yeah, they throw one elbow and he's bouncing off the bulkhead. So he starts thinking about her persona and why she might have adopted it in the first place.
Her flamboyance, Miles increasingly felt, was an effective act, meant to be viewed at a distance like a stage makeup, to dazzle her troops. At the right range, it might work rather well, like the popular Baryaran general of his grandfather's generation, who'd gained visibility by carrying a plasma rifle like a swagger stick. Usually uncharged, Miles had heard privately. The man wasn't stupid. Or a Vorish ensign who wore a certain antique dagger at every opportunity. A trademark, a banner, a calculated bit of mass psychology.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a reference to George S. Patton, who was, he always had his swagger stick with him.
Who's that?
George S. Patton was a general in the U.S. Army. He was a part of World War II, maybe the Korean War, but he was very outlandish. Like he had his suits tailored, even though in the Army you're supposed to kind of wear what everyone else wears. He was just a real idiosyncratic dude.
Sounds flamboyant. Was he like?
Yes, exactly.
Is he well regarded then? Is he like?
He's well known. I don't know how well regarded he is. He had a movie made about him, starring George C. Scott, but he was really odd. I don't know how effective his military efforts were, but his character, his vibe is well known. And mentioning the Vorish ensign who wore a dagger, that's Miles, obviously. So Miles wonders if Gregor has been feeding her false information. Maybe there really was a loathed proposed bride, and Gregor had not trusted Miles enough to mention it. Miles began to regret being quite so acerbic to Gregor.
I was thinking this before. He was pretty rude about it all, but I can understand why.
I
Not
mean,
so
it's like,
fun.
hey, bro, I just tried to kill myself. You dickhead. What the fuck?
Yeah.
That's how he was acting, yeah.
Yeah.
If you do that in normal relationships that aren't with an emperor, like they often shut down
Mm.
after that, even if you have important stuff to talk about. So Cavilla brings a guy in who IDs Miles as Admiral Naismith. And he's kind of wondering if Gregor blew his cover.
Mm. That's what you said before about maybe that's one of the things that Gregor could betray Miles with.
Yeah.
Thank you. That would be all, Sergeant. Cavilli took the man by the arm and firmly pulled him away. The non-com's fading advice drifted back down the cell bay. You ought to try to hire him, ma'am. He's a military genius. Cavilli reappeared after a moment to stand in the aperture with her hands on her hips and her chin outthrust in exasperated disbelief. How many people are you anyway?
Oh, man. He's 3 so far. He might get more.
It's also funny in general in this book because Miles is so out of control through this whole thing, pretty much. And everybody, people doesn't know what type of control he's in. So he's just trying to act like, oh, this is my plan. And it's all like totally
Yes.
random.
That is his primary mode, is like make them think I'm on top of my shit and I'm smarter than I really am. I know more than I really do. It's really like an object lesson for how a spy should behave.
Yeah. But it's also, it seems like it comes easier to him this book because so much things happen that it doesn't make any sense to him. And then people are just
Yeah.
like, what? How did you do this? And it's like, oh, I won't tell you because I
Yeah,
don't know.
everybody who comes across him is like, how are you in every place at the right time with the right people? Like, what? Why are you always in the mix? And it's
Yeah.
like, well, we know it's because somebody wrote this, but for Miles, who knows?
Mm.
So that's the end of chapter 12. Chapter 13, she relents and gives Miles the use of the ship's gym. And so he's there, he's studying the tactical situation, and he wishes he had Ivan with him, who could actually overpower a guard. And then he finds out they have Oser's evil blonde lieutenant who had thrown him out the airlock, and he's just out of fast penta interrogation, so he's all smiley.
Hmm. I honestly forgot where we saw him, but now when you said about the airlock, then I realized where he was. I was like, what? Who was this one again?
Yeah. So Miles grabs his hand and he sees the bite marks his own teeth had left. I'm not sure why he did that. Maybe he was just confirming that it was the same guy, but it was an
Yeah, I
interesting
think so.
image.
So he was the one that was gonna cut off his tongue. So that's why he bit him, right?
Oh, yes. Okay, yeah. So he thinks the Othserans maybe have only been around for a day or so. He's not sure.
Mm.
Most important question of all, had the Oseran come to Vervain Station as part of a general systematic sweep, or had he followed specific clues? Was Tongue compromised? Elena arrested? Miles shuddered and paced frenetically, helplessly. Have I just killed my friends? Ugh. That's a bummer.
Yeah.
Everything's so fucking high stakes, and he's just stuck in this cell.
And he's so used to trying to control everything. So then he just feels responsible for everyone. He's like, oh, I killed this freighter captain. I killed my friends. It's like, you did nothing, you know. Stop being so full of
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. So now he's thinking maybe Gregor didn't actually finger him as Naismith. It might have been this guy.
But would that guy even know he was there, or did he show a picture? Like, do you know these people?
Well, I think the only reason he'd actually be on Vervain Station is for intelligence work,
Hmm.
and he would recognize Miles because he had just been about to cut his tongue off earlier,
Yeah,
like
but when did he see Miles on the ship?
mm, was Miles ever walking around on Vervain, or has he been in Cavillo's custody the entire time?
Yeah, I feel like he's not been seen by anyone until at that time. So when Cavillo came to his cell, that was the first time. Or
So maybe
or
this guy was just following clues that we
yeah,
don't know specifically what they were.
yeah, it's a little bit hard to follow, but I can see it makes sense that Miles wouldn't know the whole picture because it would be weird if it's like, oh, I can understand that actually he saw me at this point. But it's not totally clear to know when he saw Miles in Cavillo's custody.
The Oserans might even have assets in Randall's Rangers,
Mm.
like spies in the ranks.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. So maybe he came to try to like assassinate him or something, and he was captured. And then they're like,
Ooh,
"Oh, why were you here?" It's like I tried to kill Admiral Naismith, so
yeah.
that could work. Okay, so I will read this one.
Yeah, so the identification.
So the identification of Miles as Admiral Naismith hadn't necessarily come from Gregor, as Miles first had assumed. The Tau Verde veteran had clearly been scrunched up as an unbiased cross-check. If Gregor was systematically withholding information from her, Cavillo would now realize it. If he was withholding anything, maybe he was in love by now. Miles's head throbbed, feeling on the verge of exploding.
Ugh, God, just around and around the anxiety train. So he thinks the guards are taking him to a fast penta interrogation. Instead, he's taken to Cavillo's quarters. Gregor's not there, or he can't see him anyway. And Cavillo's starting to look tired. And I was like, maybe she's up late working. But then I was like, well, maybe she's been up, you know, taking care of business with Gregor. Miles's nose itches, but he resolves not to pick it. Your emperor's in terrible trouble, little Vorlord. To save him, you must return to the Oseran mercenaries and retake them. When you are back in command, we will communicate further instructions. Miles boggled. Danger from what? He choked. You? Not at all. Greg is my best friend, the love of my life at last. I'd do anything for him. I'd even give up my career. She smirked piously. Miles's lip curled in repelled response. She grinned. If any other course of action occurs to you besides following your instructions to the letter, well, it could land Greg in unimaginable troubles at the hands of worse enemies.
Mhm.
Who are the worse enemies?
I guess it's just her way of trying to make herself into the good guy.
Oh, yeah, obviously she's angling. Like, he's my best friend, the love of my
Hmm.
life. Come on, give me a break.
I guess, I don't know, who would be the worst people to send Gregor to? I was gonna say like the Citaganas or something, but they are not, I guess the Comarans, right? They should send them to the Comaran rebels, which we have not talked about so far, but they exist. It's not a spoiler.
Yeah. Well, we know from this book that Metzov fought against the rebels.
Hmm.
Uh,
That's
I
true.
don't know if we know specifically that they're still around.
They talk about how many people would die if Gregor was
Yes.
lost, and then they talk about how people would die on Comar. So I guess there's some idea on there being at least some unrest at both places.
Yeah. Also, Jackson's Hole could be dangerous to Gregor.
I
Aslan, Pol,
suppose.
Vervain, probably not as much.
Do you think just, I mean, they don't care about him for being an emperor, right?
Yeah, and they're not imperial powers. They're not likely to hold him for some political gain, other
Hmm.
than just ransom, I guess.
Yeah.
But who wants to make Barrayar their enemy,
Hmm.
except another imperial power, which in this area, as far as we know, is only Sita Ganda, right?
Hmm. Yeah, maybe Siraganda would just be better off killing him because that would be their most useful for him.
Yeah, we don't know much about them at this point. Um, I could speculate, but most of it's on other book knowledge. So he asks how she can help him take back the Dindari, and she says he'll have to do it on his own. He asks what she'll do if he succeeds.
What if I succeed instead? His eyes were starting to water. He sniffed. He would have to rub his madly itching nose soon. The key of strategy, little Vor, she explained kindly, is not to choose a path to victory, but to choose so that all paths lead to a victory. Ideally, your death has one use, your success another.
Yes, this is something I explore in my books. There's a billionaire lady that's secretly a criminal, and she's always telling her people make sure you have a backup plan and an ace in the hole minimum. And it sounds like Cavillo is definitely subscribes to that school.
Mm.
When I play role playing games, like if I'm playing a smart character, a lot of times I'll waste my fellow players' time because I'm like, we got to make sure we have a backup plan and then a little surprise. And they're like, all right. When they just want to rush in with swords and kill the monsters.
Does it help?
It always helps. We lose fewer lives of our players or our henchmen, innocent people. We capture more bad guys. It's always a good idea. So he asks to speak to Gregor. She says he can if he succeeds. And then he starts tearing up. And she is disgusted. She starts talking smack, like, quit crying, you baby. And then he's like, I'm allergic to your perfume. To which she starts giggling and then muses about how she could put it into a gas grenade.
Yeah, this scene, I found it funny when I read it that it's so there's so many, in how to explain it, like you could just have their conversation and that would be interesting. But then it's like, no, we also must have another drama on top of it. And it's like, I think it's part of the feel of this book, that it's always this um so many things happening at once. It gives like the franticness of Miles's like how Miles is feeling.
There's all these multiple layers weaving in and out of each other, different
Yeah, and just
plans within
somehow like
plans.
to make it feel like very crisis like all of the time. So even when they just like talking, it's like, no, I'm dying here from perfume
Yeah, the
poisoning.
first thing I thought was she has like this evil, poison perfume,
Oh yeah, that
which
could have
maybe
been
he
it.
was thinking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Turns out it was just regular perfume. So he's like, "Can I have some boots at least?" She's like, "Nope." He's like, "If I wear this uniform, they're gonna shoot me." And she's like, "Tough titty." So they put him on a ship called the Curran's Hand and fly him out towards Aslan Station. At one point, he thinks about hanging himself, but the architecture of the room he's in won't allow it.
So dramatic.
Yeah, I don't know if he ever would, but he thinks about
Mm.
it.
Yeah, I mean in this case, he was being dramatic, I think.
Yeah. However, there is a thing that some people experience, which is they're probably never going to actually commit suicide, but the suicidal ideation actually serves as this like weird coping mechanism.
Hmm.
I don't know if that's anything
No,
a
that could
part
be
of
it.
this, but
I can imagine it. It's kind of like a way to feeling more in control. That you're like, I could,
I have
I could kill
one way out.
myself. Yeah.
I'm not going to use it, but it's
Uh,
there.
yeah, I was gonna say it seems like Lois really likes to have her characters in slippers because I feel like here he's in slippers, and I remember in another book Cordelia was in slippers, and you just feel like I don't have any normal shoes on. I think it's interesting, I wonder if it's like, is it meant to be like it's more vulnerable? I mean, of course it is, but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
like, why the slippers in particular?
Well, okay. We already know that Miles has trouble, like if he runs and falls the wrong way, he could break a bone. Not being able to wear boots, especially on a ship with like the decking and like hard surfaces and slippery areas and stuff, um, he could more easily fall down. This is the thing that us dungeon masters will do in role playing games is take away somebody's gear or have them wake up in their underwear in a cell or whatever. Like
Mm,
basically take away the things they rely on to be effective warriors, and it ratchets up the fear or the suspense.
yeah. Did you ever take away the shoes and have them wear slippers?
No, I definitely am going to steal that. Let me write that
Mm.
down. Take their shoes.
You
All
have to
right.
be in a universe that uses slippers then.
Indeed. Let's see. The ship arrives near Aslan Station. There's a ship on picket, which is basically long range patrol. And it's the Ariel, which is Belle Thorne's ship, or at least was when he last saw them. They communicate with it, and yeah, this is Belle Thorne's ship. The guys on Miles' ship call him Victor Rotha. So I'm Rotha again. Miles mustered a smarmy alliteration. Lois. So I'm Rotha again. Miles mustered a smarmy smile and sidled closer. He eyed the viewer, striving to conceal his hungry interest. The Ariel? Yes, there it was in the vid display, the sleek Illyrican-built cruiser. Did Belle Thorne still command her? How can I get myself onto that ship? And next he pulls a real sneaky thing that people do sometimes. The answer is probably no, so I've got a couple comps, but have you heard of the Brer Rabbit stories?
I might know of it in a translation. Let me check. Looks weird.
So it's a southern set of folk tales, and I can't remember if it comes out of the black tradition or like racist white tradition. I think Brer Rabbit is coded kind of minstrelly, but he's one of the influences for Bugs Bunny.
Hmm.
So you can kind of see that what his plan is sort of Bugs-ish. He's trying to get thrown off the ship.
I was just gonna comment that I haven't really watched much Bugs Bunny. I only saw the basketball movie.
Oh, Space Jam.
Yeah, I think that's the only Bugs Bunny movie I've seen.
So I haven't seen Space Jam, but maybe this happens in that. It's like he wants to go to a place.
Mm.
So then he's like, please, no, don't throw me in there. And they're like, oh, we should throw him in there. Whoosh, and
Yeah.
Brer Rabbit would be like, don't throw me in the briar bush. And the coyote or whatever the bad guy is throws him in it. And
Mm.
he's like, I live my life in the briar bush. Like, and he slips out.
Mm.
Sort of like Bane, I was born in the shadows. So start at lieutenant, you and the corporal.
Lieutenant, you and the corporal take this little mutant to the port side personal lock. Pack him in a pod and eject him. We're going home. No, said Miles weakly, as they each took an arm. Yes. He dragged his feet, carefully not to offer enough resistance to risk his bones. You're not going to space me! The aerial! Oh my god!
So that's a little interesting that the last 4 words, it's the aerial, my God. But it's not in italics. So it's almost like, I don't know, it's almost like Lois checking in, unless she meant to italicize it and didn't. Or maybe because the aerial has to be italicized.
Yeah, that could be
I think
why.
that's what it is. Otherwise,
Probably.
she'd have to italicize the whole sentence and unitalicize the aerial, which could be
Yeah,
confusing.
because otherwise, you're right, it's not really a description, it's more of a thought, actually. But
yeah, I think the ellipsis is a clue there, because like the narrator's not going to put in an ellipsis generally.
no. This is one of the few times when Miles actually affects the plot instead of pretending that he did, like in the other times.
I got to take a quick break. I'll be right back. And we're back.
Welcome. Or as we say in Swedish, välkommen.
Välkommen. That's similar to the German.
Maybe.
Välkommen.
I don't speak German. But it's very similar to Swedish. We took all of the words, that's why.
So the captain tells the aerial that they're leaving, but the captain of the Kern's Hand or whatever it is tells the aerial that they're leaving, but they're leaving them a present, which is Miles in a bod pod. So we hear what a bod pod is and how it works.
Miles emitted a realistic wail as he was stuffed into the bod pod's dank, plastic-smelling interior. A jerk of the ripcord, and it sealed and inflated automatically. He had a brief, horrible flashback to the mud-sunken bubble shelter of Kirill Island, and choked back a real scream. He was tumbled as his captors rolled the pod into the airlock. A whoosh, a thump, a lurch, and he was free falling in pitch darkness.
That sounds terrible.
I wonder, did you read the Murderbots books?
Yeah, I've read most of them, yeah.
I wonder if the author got like their inspiration for the which book was it? I think it was like the later one when we talked about using this kind of bod pod similar machine to get to another ship.
Yeah, I know the Expanse has emergency spacesuits. I don't know if they have.
No, but it's not the same. It's not described this way. Like I think this is very similar to the one that in Murderbot, because they talk about how it's just like basically a lifeboat that you just have a bubble that you blow up, and then you can't really control it or anything, and it's just like having a little bit of a beacon on it.
Yeah.
I guess there's no radio beacon on this one. It's only the light, it seems.
So he's picked up by a tractor beam, taken inside the aerial, and they open up the pod. A slim officer with captain's insignia leaned with one foot on a canister, watching Miles emerge. The officer's neat uniform and soft brown hair gave no clue whether one was looking at a delicate man or an unusually determined woman. This ambiguity was deliberately cultivated. Belle Thorne was a Baton hermaphrodite, minority descendant of a century-past social/genetic experiment that had not caught on. Thorne's expression melted from skepticism to astonishment as Miles rose into view. Sorry, my stomach's growling. I don't know if you can hear that. Miles grinned back. "Hello, Pandora. The gods send you a gift. But there's a catch." So this reminds me of, just if you bring it up to today, like being non-binary is just a thing, right? And hermaphrodism is a very rare sort of medical situation where I believe they tend to have both sets of genitalia, or like maybe a
Mm.
primary and
No,
a
they have both. Yeah.
secondary. They have both. Okay. So this made me think of Jamie Lee Curtis. So I put in this little bit of a quote. But for some fucked up reason, when we were young, maybe because she has a strong jaw or something, there was this rumor that she was a hermaphrodite. And I always thought that was bullshit, or at least it's none of our business. and and but so I was looking up, you know, this situation, and Jamie, I remember, is very pro trans rights, and has a trans kid. So I wanted to quote this from where did I find this article? I didn't write it down. Maybe I'll look it up and punch it in here. Jamie Lee Curtis, 64, is well known for her unapologetic trans allyship. In the past year, she has given her Oscar statuette they them pronouns, posted on Instagram in support of trans youth, and publicly advocated for her daughter, Ruby, 27, a trans woman. She had a quote: "This life is about love. Being a parent is about love, and I love Ruby. Love her," Curtis said. So in our interview with Lois, she had mentioned at one point, like, people judging work from the 80s based on knowledge we now have in the 2020s. And yeah, so I just thought it'd be interesting to tangent on that, the way our understanding is broadening. But it
Mm.
was really interesting that she, because I haven't run across this anywhere else, right? Even in 80s sci fi, the idea of an intentionally constructed gender. Usually it's like there's an alien race with 7 genders or whatever.
Yeah, that's true. I think in the Left Hand of Darkness, they have a race that is constructed to, I guess they are hermaphrodites in a sense, but they have like no gender and they change to be either man or woman or male or female.
Yes. Are you familiar with the work of Anne Leckie?
Yeah, but
So in her books,
yeah,
they I don't know if if it's a biological difference, but everyone in there uses the she her pronouns,
yeah,
whether they present female or not.
but only the Radshai. But they are like I think the difference there is that they have only one gender, but they have different sexes. But I think
Yeah.
in the Left Hand of Darkness they have, I'm not sure about the gender, but they have kind of hermaphrodite sex.
Interesting.
Yeah, but yeah, I agree. It feels quite unusual, this one, and it's. I was also gonna say that it's funny, you know, the way that this book twists and turns. We get a lot of reunions, you know, dramatic ones. So it's
Yeah.
fun that you get like first to have like, oh, it's Elena and like some of the others, and then it's just like, oh, now it's actually Belle, and it's like equally dramatic because they are like in the same kind of relief situation. So that's fun.
Yeah, it's exciting, especially if you've read the short stories where he works with her more, or works with them more. I think Lois uses it as the pronoun for Belle,
Yeah, it.
which maybe would
I was gonna
not be
say that
used in our
no, but
world,
I was gonna say it's
probably.
just it is the pronoun for animal hermaphrodites. So I'm guessing it was based on that.
Mm,
But I agree, for us
interesting.
it feels more natural to say they, and I think it probably is not like going against the spirit of the work if we use they or if we use, I don't know. You should use one or like see or something.
Oh yes, all the neo pronouns.
I was
Yeah,
actually
that's a whole fascinating tangent to go
yeah.
into
I was
those.
sad that you didn't use the like. I think there's one where you say like "see," or that sounds weird when I say it out loud. But like with "se," I think that would have been good. I don't like this they. It's
Yeah,
too
there's
confusing for me.
C, there's Z with an X.
No,
Yeah,
no
there's
X's.
it's a whole
I
bunch
forbid
of
it.
options. Well, not being trans or non-binary myself, I tend to defer to other people's choices and expertise. But yeah, it is hard to accept an X at the start of a word. It's like
Yeah.
Professor Xavier, whatever.
Yeah. Maybe it would be funny to use it just to be like, can you say this word? But it's only because we don't have like almost no X words. So I find it very difficult to
Yeah.
use it. But if you do use the XE, then I will use it for you. But it's like, what should be the official one? In Sweden, we took gender neutral pronoun from Finland because they have only gender neutral pronoun. So we took the same one for our, and people were very, I don't know, butthurt about it. Like they were like, it's too confusing. We don't like it.
Well, I
But
remember back in 2012 when I met my first non-binary person, and it was so like confronting at the time. I was like, they, them. I feel like I'm describing somebody as a piece of furniture or whatever. But it's like, well, that's what they want, What the hell? And then I met another person, and I was like, and their sex assigned at birth was female, so it seemed a little different, but they used the same pronouns. So yeah, it's listener, if you use they, them, or neo pronouns, let us know. We'd love to hear all about it. Great and secret knowledge at gmail.com. But yeah, anyway, I just thought it'd be interesting to kind of go back in time and see what Lois was doing.
yeah, I think it's a relevant thing to connect to this one.
Yeah, Miles is super happy to see Belle.
Mm. Goodness, I'm glad you're not the shoot first and ask questions later school. Miles kicked his slippered feet clear of the deflated bod pod. The soldiers, somewhat uncertainly, held their aim. Ah, Miles gestured toward them. Stand down, men, Thorne ordered. It's all right. I wish that were true, Miles said. Belle, we gotta talk.
Oh, man. So tense, heavy with meaning.
Yeah, it's so dramatic again. I love it, but it's
Of course he is. So Miles tells Thorne everything except about Gregor or Barriar. And then he asks for the tactical situation. And they explain that the Oserans are guarding Aslan Station until it's fully operational. Oser has arrested Tongue, but it seems like maybe he hasn't fast-pented him yet. Oser's taking care to keep the old inner circle separated. That's why I've been out here for nearly a bloody week. But last time I saw Baz, he was damn near edgy enough to commit to fight, and that was the last thing he'd wanted to do. Miles exhaled slowly. A fight is exactly what Commander Cavillo wants. It's why she shipped me back gift-wrapped in that undignified package, the Bod Pod of Discord. She doesn't care if I win or lose, as long as her enemy's forces are thrown into chaos, just as she springs her surprise.
I love the
Was
bod
that
pod of
suitably
Discord.
dramatic?
Yeah, that's true.
The Bod Pod of Discord, for sure.
But I think it's more acceptable if he talks about Cavillo because she seems also very dramatic. So then he can pretend that
Yeah.
it's actually her. He's just describing her, and that's why.
Mm-hmm. I also think of Naismith as like twice as big as Vor Game.
That's true.
Put a little English on it. So Belle asks what Cavillo is planning. Miles says he hasn't figured it out just yet, but he's determined to work with Oser, not against him.
I was realizing something. He he must have switched accent in the middle of this because he's like, oh, and now I'm Victor Ratha. So then he must do the Baton accent, and he's doing the Baton accent to Belle, but they don't mention it.
Yeah, I think we just have to uh, think back, because we've seen him be Naismith a
Yeah,
few
yeah.
times so far in this one, at least.
I think it makes sense. I was just thinking about it now. I was gonna joke with you about you had to do the Baton accent now when he's being Baton, but then I realized no, he was Baton back in the when he was being Victor Rafa as well. So it would have been hard if we tried to keep up with the accent. It would have been difficult for us to be like, maybe I can do a Swedish accent for the Baton one, but I
Ooh, I
already
like
have one.
that.
So
What she said is they have flat vowels, so it makes me think of Chicago. So I kind of gave a little extra open
that's
mouth on the
good.
vowels.
Cooperation between us may be the one and only course of action Camilla doesn't expect. Doesn't have a half-sawn through branch of her strategy tree, ready and waiting for me. Are you willing to put it all on the line for me, Belle? Thorn pursed lips judiciously. From here, yeah. The Ariel's the fleet's fastest ship. I can outrun retribution if I have to. Thorn grinned. I just noticed, since we talked about the pronouns, that it's like Louis.
Oh, she often skips the pronoun by using the name again.
Yeah, so I think maybe she felt a little bit weird using too many it's. It can be distracting,
Mm-hmm.
possibly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a pretty common workaround because I'm always like, it's especially hard when the object and the subject both have the same pronoun. So, like, I don't know, Miles had a problem with him that then something happened to Miles, who was a him. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
have a good
can
example,
be
but
confusing.
so repeating the name sometimes is the best way to go. So he gets a gray and white uniform, and then he gets on the mic with Oser. And Oser is immediately freaked out. And before he can cut off, Miles charges forward. And he asks if Oser knows what Cavillo's been up to. You know Cavillo? Your opposite number across system? I've encountered her once or twice. Oser's face was guarded now, waiting for his scrambling tech team to report. Face like an angel, mind like a rabid mongoose? Oser's lips twitched very slightly. You've met her. Oh, yes. She and I had several heart-to-heart talks. They were educational. Information is the most valuable trade good in the hub right now. At any rate, mine is. I want to deal. I love when he says, I want a deal. So Oser threatens to charge Thorn with mutiny, or at least he says this is mutiny. And Thorn responds.
Thorn leaned into the range of the vid pickup and said brightly, No, sir, it's not. We are trying to save your ungrateful neck, if you will permit it. Listen to the man. He has lines we don't. He has lines, all right. And under his breath, damn Baton sticking together. Whether you fight me or I fight you, Admiral Oser, we both lose, said Miles rapidly.
So this is his ploy. Miles explains that the only way to beat Cavillo is for he and Oser to work together, because it's exactly what she doesn't expect. How much profit do you foresee in doing precisely what your enemy wishes you to, eh? Miles waited breathless. Oser's jaw worked, chewing over this impassioned argument. What's your profit? He asked at last. Ah, I'm afraid I'm the dangerous variable in that calculation, Admiral. I'm not in it for profit. Miles grinned. So I don't care what I wreck. And Oser starts to ease up a bit, and Miles is like, yeah, I've got him hooked. Time to reel him in.
Yeah, I will read this, but I trying to figure out who says this.
So this is Miles talking about how we got to handle Cavillo.
Oh, yeah. Anything Cavillo says must certainly be sifted with great care. But beauty is as beauty does, and I found her vulnerable side. Cavillo has no vulnerable side. Yes, she does. Her passion for utility, her self-interest. I fail to see how that makes her vulnerable. Precisely why you need to add me to your staff at once. You need my vision. Hire you? Also recoiled in astonishment. Well, he achieved surprise, anyway. A military objective of sorts. I understand the post of Chief of Staff Tactical is now empty. Osa's expression flowed from astonished to stunned to a kind of amused fury. You're insane! No, just in a tearing hurry. Tearing?
Yes.
Tearing
Tearing, I
hurry.
think, like tearing ass, running off real fast. I always love these moments when Miles works someone up so much that they're like, "You're insane." People just don't know how to deal with Miles's go, go, go bullshit.
Yeah.
So Miles says he does not have time for personal bullshit like revenge. Oser's like, well, I could hang Tongue. That would be irrevocable. Miles paused. I will point out, jailing Tongue is like cutting off your right hand before heading into battle. What battle? With whom? It's a surprise. Cavillo's surprise. Though I've developed an idea or two on the problem that I'd be willing to share. Would you? Oser had that same man-sucking-a-lemon expression Miles had now and then surprised on Ilian's face. It seemed almost homey. Ugh.
What would
Man.
you do if you were in Oser's position here?
Well, I would never have thrown Miles out an airlock or threatened to cut off his tongue. However, if I put my Dungeon Master's hat on and pretend to be Oser, I would sputter and just be in a state because Miles makes sense. The reason Oser wanted to get rid of Miles in the first place is because he has a magical tongue that can, just worm its way into your brain, and it's like you really don't know what to do.
Yeah, can't help but to be convinced.
Yeah. But Miles is right. Like in the past, Oser made more money by working with Miles and stayed alive, so he's got to be thinking about that as well. So Miles pitches him on cooperation. And then he's like, well, if you won't let me be your employee, what about me being your employer?
I'm authorized to offer a bona fide. What is it? Bona fide?
We usually say bona fide, but I think it is from Latin bona fide.
Oh, okay. Bona fide contract. All the usual perks, equipment replacement, insurance from my sponsor. Ilian, hear my plea. Not in conflict with Aslan's interest. You can collect twice for the same fight, and you don't even have to switch sides. A mercenary's dream.
And I believe this is our first exposure to the idea of getting paid twice. Has this happened before? I can't remember in past books, but it's definitely part of this story.
I don't think chronologically, no.
It's hard to pass up, like Oser's just like, oh shit, double the money. Fuck. So Miles is thinking how he has a big game, but he has very few actual details on the Vervani situation, more strategic insights. Oser is still skeptical. This is Miles. We will confer. You may even have an angle I lack. Then we go on from there. Oser thinned his lips, bemused, half persuaded, deeply suspicious. The risk, I would point out, said Miles, the personal risk, is more mine than yours. I think. Miles hung suspended on the mercenary's words. I think I'm going to regret this. Oser sighed. Ugh. Exasperating the enemy. So they arrive on the Triumph. They're going through they're about to go through the flex tube. Thorn is worried Oser will capture them and fast penta Miles. If he fast pentas me, I'll tell him exactly the facts I was going to tell him anyway. And a few more besides, alas. And he'll have fewer doubts. So much the better. Miles, Thorn, and 6 troops meet Oser and his 20. And Thorn is concerned.
We're outnumbered, muttered Thorn. It's all in their mind, Miles muttered in return. March like you have an empire at your back. And don't look over your shoulder. They may be gaining on us. They better be gaining on us. The more people who see me, the better.
And Elena's there, unarmed. So at this point, we don't know why he wants everyone to see him. I was kind of thinking, because he's Admiral Naismith, and everybody will get hyped up and excited for the future and want to work together. Turns out that's not quite, not quite why. Elena is with Oser. She's unarmed. Miles convinces Oser to take him on a tour throughout the station. And it goes on for like 45 minutes. And you can take this one.
It became a parade. Miles led them around for a good 45 minutes, including a march through the cafeteria during the dinner rush, with several noisy stops to greet by name the few old and dairy he recognized and favor the others with blinding smiles. He left babbles in his wake, those in the dark demanding explanation from those in the know. But I think that you're right that this is why he does it. It's just that he makes up another reason later.
Yeah. Or it could be that he has 2 things going on. Miles often does that, as we talked about layers. He's got multiple plots going. But yeah, I'm sure it's nice to get the crowd on your side, especially if you're doing this political trickery to, team up with Oser again.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the way that he's getting for this is that he feels like if he's seen by a lot of people, then it will be more uncomfortable for Oser to throwing out the airlock again.
Oh, yeah, even a 3rd level that like he'll be less likely to kill him because then he'd have to explain it to the troops. Although he probably has enough loyal people that he can do it secretly and nobody will find out.
Yeah.
Until they see him rotating in space outside the window.
The other, in another book, there's talk about like the airlocks being logged so that if you throw something else, people will know. So will people be like, I saw in the logs you threw out Admiral Naismith. Oh.
Yeah, that was in the Baton conflict with Barry R. There was some kind of morgue worker or whatever. Right? Wasn't that the case?
No, I was thinking about it with in regards to the client station with Ethan of Athos. In that one, they talk about you can't just throw the bodies out the airlock.
That's right, because they had all these bodies they had to deal with.
What to do with the bodies?
So Elena asks where Gregor is. Miles is like, tell you later. And he finally agrees to get moving to the Triumph, his little mission accomplished. There. Obedient to Cavillo's orders, Miles had made no attempt to contact Barry R. But if Ungari couldn't find him after this, it was time to fire the man. A prairie bird thrumming out a mad mating dance could scarcely have put on a more conspicuous display.
Oh yeah, that was the real reason you meant. I was thinking about the reason that he gives later when they talk about why he was parading around.
Oh, to draw out fourth level to draw out the assassin. Love it. This
Yeah.
sentence, though, I gotta say, this is like a cruel trick by Lois. A prairie bird thrumming out a mad mating dance could scarcely have put on a more conspicuous display. Ugh. It's a great image, but it's it's hard in the mouth.
Tonguewrangler.
Yeah, it's a Tonguewrangler. That's a good show title. Oh, I wish we did funny show titles. Thorn Sergeant pushes Miles down, then gets hit by a nerve disruptor. Miles ends up having to use his body as a shield, curling up underneath him.
The weight of the big man, the stench of his fatal injury, pressed into Miles's face. He wished the fellow massed another 50 kilos. No wonder Cavillo had been willing to front 20,000 Baton dollars towards a line on a shield suit. Of all the loathsome weapons Miles had ever faced, this had to be the most personally terrifying. A head injury that didn't quite kill him, but stole his humanity and left him animal or vegetable, was the worst nightmare. His intellect was surely his sole justification for existence. Without it, the crackle of a nerve disruptor, not aimed his way, penetrated his hearing. Miles turned his head to scream, cloth and meat muffled. Stunners! Stunners! We want him alive for questioning.
So a couple things in this section. The first is the idea that his sole justification for existence is his intellect. And this is a thing that comes up in the Song of Ice and Fire with Tyrion Lannister, where, like, somebody asks him why he reads so much, and he's like, look at me, bro. Or I think it was a lady, but, come on.
No, it's Jon
This is all
Snow.
I got.
Almost.
Yeah, so what does he say? I fuck and I read things, something like that. And also the thing about stunners, he's like, whoever this assassin is, killing him is not going to help us. But he can't even he can't even yell at that point. I think he's too fucked up. So Thorn finds Miles and says the shooter was only targeting him. He sits up and touches the dead sergeant's body. He was shaking as badly as after the shock stick beating. He regarded his spasming hands, lowered one to touch the corpse beside him in morbid wonder. Every day of the rest of my life will be your gift, and I don't even know your name. Your sergeant. What was his name? Collins. Collins. Thanks. Good man. I really appreciate that Miles and Lois respect the dead and, think about it. So often in sci-fi adventures or whatever, we're just blasting fools, laying bodies left and right.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's like, who gives a shit? But sometimes it works because, like, in that setting, life has very little weight to it. Like, maybe it's a dystopia or whatever. But when it's like real life-ish, and it's supposed to be kind of similar to us, it's always weird to me when people are just mobbing through the scene, killing folks left and right, never think twice.
Yeah.
I just watched Batman Returns last night, and fucking Batman, right? Our hero that tries to never kill anyone. Fucking Batman lights a dude on fire 15 minutes into the movie. Then he fucking blows up a guy, and then he throws Catwoman off the side of a building. And I'm like, who is this man? Anyway, that's a little tangent, but yeah, this is not like that. Elena and another female merc deliver Metsov, who is the assassin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so Miles is stunned to see him. Oser's like, who's this guy? And Miles asks, is he dead? And Elena says that he's just stunned. Oser asks again. He's getting kind of annoyed.
Who is he? Asked Oser. Quite sincerely, Miles judged. Why, Admiral? Miles bared his teeth. I told you I was gonna deliver you more intelligence data than your section could collect in a month. May I present? Rather like an entree at that. He made a gesture designed to evoke a waiter lifting a domed cover from a silver platter, but which probably looked like another muscle spasm. General Stanis Matsov, second in command, Randall's Rangers.
Ugh, another chance to be his dramatic Naismith self. Oser asks if he planned this, right? That's the fourth thing you were talking about.
Yeah.
That he tried to draw him out.
And that's what I was thinking now, that it looks really good for him. Like, oh, look, there he is, in the tables have turned.
He could have warned everyone that's what he was doing, but he instead he looks enigmatic.
Yeah.
He must have been stalking me this whole time. I think I'm going to throw up. Have I just claimed to be brilliant or incredibly stupid? Oser looked as if he was trying to figure out the answer to that same question. I feel bad for Oser. I mean, he's kind of a shitty killer, but it's got to be exasperating to deal with Miles.
Yeah. Do you feel like, okay, you're a little bit okay for being tired of him?
Yeah. Miles tries to guess why Cavillo sent Metsov after him, or if she even did.
Miles stared down at Metsov's unconscious form, trying to think. Had Metsov been sent by Cavillo, or was this murder attempt entirely on his own time? If sent by Cavillo, had she planned him to fall alive into her enemy's hands? If not, was there a backup assassin around here somewhere? And if so, was his target Metsov, if Metsov succeeded? Or Miles, if Metsov failed? Or both? I need to sit down and draw a flowchart.
Yeah, trying to figure out what Cavillo is thinking is, she basically told him, I've got 3 or 4 plans at any given moment. So he's got to figure out what the fucking things are.
How much do you think it's like the same as Miles does? Is she just like, chaos is a ladder? And she's just like trying to do dramatic things?
What was that guy's name?
Littlefinger.
From Game of Thrones? Littlefinger, yeah. That motherfucker. Chaos is a ladder. Yeah, well, I think it's slightly different because when you are ruthless, when you're somebody that can order people to kill innocents or, for no good reason or whatever, or just expediency, like you get a whole new layer of things you can do that he needs to think about, because he wouldn't necessarily just kill somebody because it was expedient. So he has to, in addition to all his normal layers, he has to think about the next level, which is what can somebody who will do anything do in that situation.
Yeah.
So Miles says to guard Metsov, he thinks that Metsov wasn't meant to survive the attack. And then they enter the Triumph. Do you think it was a failure of Cavillo not to put an assassin on Metsov?
An assassin behind the assassin. It depends, I suppose, how much
Or is that just
Metsov
one
knows.
more person that could potentially be captured?
Yeah, that I don't know. It's hard to say. It depends on how much she feels like he knows. Maybe she feels like he doesn't have the right story.
Okay, that's a nice little bit of foreshadowing for the next section. I don't want to spoil anybody that's following along, but yeah, think on that. Does she have plans within plans? Most assuredly.
Hmm.
Cavillo, you dastardly villain.
Yeah. Did I mention on the podcast how I couldn't remember Cavillo? Because I remember very little of this book for some reason the first time I read it.
Huh, that's odd.
Yeah.
I
I
feel like
usually
she's
remember.
so notable.
Yeah, but I remember almost nothing. I remember only that Gregor ran away. That was my main mention. And I did say, like, I remember, like, is there some kind of like femme fatale? But I couldn't remember her name at all. So I was, when I reread this, I was like, ooh, is this Cavillo? I don't know. And then I
Yeah,
got the surprise all over again.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that when that happens. Cavillo being, I love that part because he's like, surely it's not a James Bond thing where you get to have sex with the enemy agents. And it turns out she was clearly trying to do that
Yeah, she was
sort of
trying to
thing.
be the Bond female villain, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was just gonna mention that this is a great book to reread as well when you have read all the other ones because it's fun, like when you know, I guess for me at least, it's like I know more of the world and different characters. So it makes me a lot more invested when I've really understood all of it.
Oh man, I almost think it would be fun. Obviously, we probably don't have enough time for this, but like to do a special all spoiler section
Mm,
for the entire book. Like, some podcasts they'll have like a supplemental one in
yeah,
between. Like if we had listener feedback,
yeah.
listener,
Mm.
I'm talking to you. We could do that at the same time, and yeah,
I'm
that could be
thinking
fun.
maybe we could do a final episode that is more spoilery
Oh,
at the
okay,
very end.
yeah. We'll do a final recap, and then maybe the second part will be like how it fits into the entire oeuvre.
Hmm.
That way, if somebody is hasn't read the other books before, they can dip out at minute 30 or whatever.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, this is exciting.
Yes. And we're almost to the crescendo.
Hmm.
4 more chapters, right?
Is that all we have left? Oh my god.
Yeah, I think so. I was trying to think if there's any near-death experiences for Miles in this one, but I don't know what counts, of these. Does it count when Mezzo is like, I'm gonna break all your bodies? Or all your bones, I mean, not all your bodies.
Yeah, it's a threat the same as I don't know. I don't think there were any near death experiences here.
No,
I
I
mean, I
agree.
guess if they'd kept feeding him those terrible ration bars, that might have done it. But I don't think suicidal ideation counts. Did you feel like there was a chance that she could just kill him? Well, no, because then the books would be over and there'd be no more series.
Wait, you mean like Cavilla would kill Miles? At what point?
Yeah. Well, like if he said the wrong thing or if he got her too
Mm.
angry. Because, I mean, I think maybe that was why for the writer, for Bujold, maybe having her waste the freighter captain with no compunction, maybe that would like put some of that fear into our heads.
Yeah, at least I feel like it makes Miles's state of mind more interesting because he is very um he knows that she could kill him at any point. So maybe it's like also just makes the overall subjective stakes higher. But I think that the way we expect books to go, I don't think that people would expect to be like, oh, she's gonna kill him in the middle of the book. Uh, Although it would be funny, like I wish that some author did this, where they was like in the middle of the book just killed their point of view, and then they were like, oh, now we have another point of view.
I have one that happened in the middle of a series.
But at the end of a book,
That was at the end of a book.
ah,
So, like, people following along with the series had to wait a year or two to find out how they did it. And they ended up making the character a ghost for an entire book. I Spoiler for the next 1 minute, it was the Dresden Files, and it was amazing. He gets shot, killed at the end of one book, and the next, like, readers were infuriated. Some of them, they were like, "What the fuck? He has no power. He can't do shit. He's a ghost." But obviously, this isn't a fantasy book, so that wouldn't make any sense. I guess he could be almost killed and then like put in a cryo pod or whatever. Has that come up in this book? The idea that you could survive a near death?
I don't remember. It's not a plot point in that case.
Okay.
Might be
I think of a
mentioned,
previous
but
book.
yeah.
It happens in Doctor Who, but that's more of a fantasy show.
Yeah.
Because like they can just say some technobabble bullshit and he comes back to life.
He's coming back, yeah.
It's kind of like the price of admission for a series anchored by a single character. You're like, well, he's probably not going to die 4 chapters from the end, you know.
No, but I feel like you could do it in the start of a series, you know. I think that, but it shouldn't be at the end of the book. I think it should be like in the middle of the book. You just be like, oh, I actually recall now. There are some stories that does this, but more with the prologue, you know. So it's, if you don't know who is going to be the point of view, I suppose it can be a little bit surprising.
A Song of Ice and Fire does that several times.
Yeah,
like,
there are many people dying. But I think after the first book, yeah,
Stannis Baratheon kills his or consigns his hand to the flames, or yeah, I'm thinking of a few of those. But then you also have Ned Stark. That might be near the end of the first book, but like that happens.
yeah. I don't know. I still feel like you could have some kind of situation where you have a point of view character and it's the only point of view of the book. And it's like a person, and then you see them just being like more and more desperate, and then it's like, oh, they're gonna make it somehow, and then they die, and then you like switch to another person that somehow, you know, maybe it's like a non-point of view, the other character was with them or something.
That feels so dangerous. That feels so like a reader might hate it, but it makes me want to do it. It's so weird.
Yeah.
Like on a TV show, you could get away with that because you could do all kinds of flashbacks. Like Westworld played with this, where there were multiple timelines, so you could have a main character die halfway through, but they're not really dead, you know, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Plus that one, they're robots; they could always be re-spooled up.
I suppose so.
Yeah, but it's usually at the end of a book, yeah, or at the end of a series. Oh, I'm thinking of Samuel L. Jackson in the middle of Deep Blue Sea. He's in the middle of a speech, and a shark just comes and grabs him, takes him down.
What? I don't remember this.
That shocked everyone. Isn't that Deep Blue Sea? Or maybe it's The Sphere. It's some underwater movie.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen Deep Blue Sea. That's why I don't know it. Yeah, but that can be fun also if you do it. Maybe it could be. I feel like it's more used in parodies and such, that you just have a character and then you're just like, oh no, they're dead. Or you like kill someone off really quickly.
Yeah, you can get away with a lot more in a comedy for sure. Oh, I know who did it. Fucking Stephen King.
Oh.
He got stuck writing The Stand, and he was like, I had writer's block for weeks, and then one day I was like, I gotta consider my maxim, which is kill your darlings. And that was always, for him, that was like, get rid of a scene that isn't working, or get rid of a whole plot line if it's not working. And he was like, oh, I could kill a few of my characters here. And so he kills one of your favorite characters in a bombing.
Is it a point of view?
No, that's a fully third person, like overhead view kind of book.
Okay.
the point of view, I mean, halfway through, like my second book, there is a moment like that, but I have multiple point of view characters. I kind of write it like Song of Ice and Fire, where like each chapter's from a different character. But there is a moment where like I considered doing, should I stick with this set of characters until that point and then go back in time to the other set of characters? And so then we meet that point, and it's only then that we find out that the guy survived. Spoiler alert for
No, don't
if
spoil
that ever
it.
comes out. But
now you
yeah,
have to rewrite it.
that could be really disturbing to a reader to be like, one of my favorite characters just up and died halfway through. Whereas if I did it back and forth narratively, you'd be like, you know, a chapter or two later, you'd be like, oh, he's alive, which wouldn't be quite as momentous. Yeah.
No.
It's funny how I try not to think about the reader's feelings while I write, but then I second guess myself. So.
Yeah. I guess maybe you should wear different hats and you can do different things with it. You know, like you can wear the reader hat and then the orphan writer
it's like
hat.
different times a day, different parts in the process. Yeah, that's kind of like how they say not to erase when you're writing. That you want the editor to have their specific time, and the creator is kind of like they're two separate people or two separate hats.
Yeah.
But if you try to edit as you go, you can really fucking thwart your creativity.
Yeah.
Oh, there's another thing we could have asked Lois about.
About editing?
Yeah. It sounded like she always had people to bounce ideas off of, and what's her name?
Lillian.
One of them was an editor. One of the people she mentioned.
I don't know which one that was. But I don't remember which part we asked about, but I remember when I read some of the other interviews, she talked about her writing process with the, like, that she considers, you know, making up the story and writing the story two different processes. So like the plotting is separate from the writing. I think she talked about this, right? Because you talked about how you would write, like, find the plot that you wrote.
Yeah, well, you were away on break. I cut that part out of the episode, or I think I did.
Okay,
you weren't
bonus.
There,
it's only for if you give money to Jeff, you can get it. It's a second secret cutoff.
Yes. Email us and I'll give you my Venmo. We don't have a Patreon set up at this point in the timeline. There's also a thing called Buy Me a Coffee. Sometimes people do before they get a Patreon. It's like a little easier. Maybe we'll do that.
Yeah, but I think the writing process, you can find it in many different interviews. But I thought it was interesting, is the way that
I used to do it that way, where I just like muse about my story ahead of time. And I found, for me at least, it ended up being kind of pointless because I wasn't getting any work done. I was just sort of daydreaming. So now that's more like a subconscious process, or I'll write a chapter that I end up not using just to sort of get the juices flowing. Like I remember there was a chapter halfway through where I was like, after I read it, I was like, this is just exposition about what just happened. Like the reader doesn't, it's like, what, did they go away for a week and now they need to be reminded?
Oh, yeah.
So I ended up changing that entire chapter. But yeah, I love talking about the writing process. I had a whole podcast about it, more or less, before this one, called Everything is Awesome. I'll mention it in plugs. So let's give Rex. Do you have any recommendations for the listener?
I think I might. I was reading what was it called now? The Peace War by Werner Vinge. It's good. I've liked all the other Werner Vinci books that I read. This one I think is a little bit earlier than his other works. At least it felt like that, but I might have gotten it mixed up. And it's a little bit less imaginative than some of his other books that I've read. It's a little bit more standard. Or not standard, I suppose, but it's like it's it's kind of close to our world, but there's
Oh.
some difference in technology. While some of his other works is like aliens and stuff involved.
Now, was that one more character driven or more kind of concepts, plot?
Hmm.
I found A Deepness in the Sky had this weird dichotomy. That's the only
Yeah.
Ving I've read, where I loved the stuff that was happening in space that had really interesting characters and like plot heavy. And then
Mm.
down on the planet, it was these spider people just having their regular old domestic lives. It was very
That's
odd.
that's funny because I almost felt the opposite. Or I guess I liked the space part, but it was like sometimes it was a little bit confusing the way that they described some of the things that it felt like took me out of it, while the spider
Hmm.
part was more engrossing for me. But now this one, I think it is very focused on an overarching story, but it's also like there is kind of a relationship in the center of it, where it's like this young man and another person that like um, I don't know how much to get into it because you would if you read it. I don't want to give too much away, but then there's a lot of focus on like how does this different technology work and what does it actually mean and can people make out these calculations about it. So I enjoyed it, but it was also it was a little bit weird with the gender dynamics, but I liked that it was like a little bit morally gray, that you don't really know, like, am I actually rooting for these people or am I rooting for the other, like the antagonist. It seems like they had a
Oh,
little bit of a some good and bad, each of them.
interesting.
Yeah.
I did feel that his dialogue was pretty good in Deepness in the Sky. It was pretty compelling. Sometimes hard sci-fi writers, character and dialogue is not at the forefront.
Yeah, that can be. And I wouldn't probably be the best judge of that because a lot of times, people will say like, "Oh, this book was beautifully written." And I'd be like, "Oh, I don't know. I missed it." Sometimes I can really, but I think for me it's more about the specific phrase at one specific sentence, and I don't really think about like the writing as a whole, I suppose.
Hmm. Have you read any Connie Willis?
I did not like it that much. It was interesting concept, but it was so slow. I read the one with the one where they go back to the Middle Ages.
The Black Plague one?
Yeah.
That one is so sad and so bleak and so just heavy. Yeah, that's probably the hardest one of hers to read.
Oh,
I
really?
I always recommend Blackout and All Clear, which
Mm.
is almost like a screwball romance
Ah,
comedy
okay.
in the midst of the great tragedies all around of World War II.
Mm.
But yeah, it's a lot more fun.
So you think that it's different in tone or like in pacing?
Yes, very much so.
Oh,
Same
okay.
same historian time travelers,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
just a lot more fun.
Okay. Yeah, maybe
Um,
it would be more because for me, I guess I don't exactly mind the tone of it. It's just that it was very repetitive. It's like a lot of things were just repeated over and over again, and it felt like it was too
Interesting.
slow.
I've only read it once. I'd have to give it another taste.
I think some people complained like, why are they using cell phones? But it was written a while ago. But some people get tripped up on that because there's a lot of like problems with communication in the modern times, and they're just like, oh, we have to get to this place and ask this person, and then it's like, it can be a little bit. I suppose a little bit frustrating if you're like not really into the, okay, this is the past, but the future, you know.
That's right. So in the future, they're running from building to building rather
Yeah.
than just picking up the phone. And then they don't have communicators into the past like a Star Trek team might.
Yeah, and that could be the communication down to the past. That's like a more in, I guess for people it's like a little bit more understandable, but the communication in the present can be a little bit distracting.
I love works that get that one wrong because I want modern people to know what it was like when you have to think, what if my phone's battery was dead and so is everyone else's, and all you could do is landlines or leave notes with someone or like tape it to the door. Like it was a nightmare trying to coordinate shit. You have to plan everything well in advance.
Mm.
Annoying. Payphones? Never again. Anyway, I mentioned Connie Willis because she has this book of stories called A Lot Like Christmas. And I picked that up around the holidays. And it didn't get very far into it, so I'm going to have to re-borrow it from the library. But her work is I always love it, and it's usually a lot of fun, except for
Except for
the
this one.
Bellwether. Is that what that's called? Or it's not the, yeah, I think it's the Bellwether. Something like that. So check out A Lot Like Christmas. And then I wanted to, well, of course, Unspoiled and Spoil Me. Just an inspirational show. Natasha goes through all these different properties and, yeah, inspired me to do this show for sure.
Yeah, you can listen to each of the Vor Game coverage and compare.
Yes, on the Spoil Me feed. Yeah, Google Spoil Me, Four Coasts Again. You'll find it. Shards
Yeah.
of Honor or Vor Game, whatever.
I wonder though if there are parallels. Maybe it's us remembering and we just like repeat some of the
That
things that she
happened during
said.
the interview. I said that you had said something,
Oh
but then
yeah.
afterwards I'm like, oh, that was probably Natasha or
Yeah,
somebody on the
yeah.
Discord. Shit, sorry about that.
Mhm. I think yeah,
um,
I think what it was that we talked in our podcast, we talked about Natasha's thought when she read this one. So it's
that's
like
right.
a
That's
bit of
right.
a weird Russian doll thing. Like in this doll is another doll.
Yeah, it's always weird. Like I I listen. A lot of the podcasts I like are coverage of properties like this. So I worry sometimes like that I have to kind of sequester myself. Um, but I can't do that with Natasha because I listen to all her shows all the time. So
I kind of feel, everything is a remix as long as it's better maybe to listen to many people because then you won't be like too much
oh
copying one
yeah, steal
person.
multiple ideas.
Yeah. And maybe like a very different ones, I should listen to some Swedish podcasts or something and then I will have like totally
Oh,
different perspective. That's good. I don't
oh
think there's
yeah.
much of the war game though. I was trying to talk to Swedes about like the interview and people were just like, "Oh, I don't know her." Like and they don't know any sci-fi. They are very uncultured.
Uncultured swine. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, they only like crime
It's
novels. Everyone in Sweden reads crime only.
oh yeah, like dragon tattoo, that sort of stuff.
Yes, absolutely. This is actually the guy that wrote this. He was like, "Oh, I want to make money. I will write these crime novels." And then he made a lot of money. He was a journalist, so he just wanted to
That's right. Yeah.
make more money.
But yeah, Miles Schneiderman and Natasha on Patreon are covering Mistborn, and so they're on the last Mistborn book right now, The Lost Metal. And so it's got me reading that again. So I want to encourage people to check out the Mistborn saga. And if you haven't read The Lost Metal yet, give it a listen. It's a lot of fun. They've got like new gods. It's got some wild lore has arrived at the very last book, which can be annoying. Like the Deathly Hallows, where she just pulls out this shit that should have been there the whole time, but
No,
was only
I
in the
always
last
like
book.
that. I have no problem with
Oh,
that
okay.
one. Yeah. I'll defend that
Brando
part.
Sando seeds these things a little better, I think.
That's true. That is correct.
So yeah, that should do it for recommendations. Once again, send us an email. Be a part of the show. greatandsecretknowledge@gmail.com. Eventually, I'll try to get us some more social media. I'm terrible at that. Shattered Worlds, like, I promote it even less than I used to now. It's so lame, but it's a great show. Check out Shattered Worlds RPG. And my streaming actual play show called Omniversal Escapades. We've done Monster of the Week. Right now we're in a D&D sort of post-apocalyptic thing. And I did a Star Trek Adventures over there. I think we played two of our friends' games, Lucid City and Relay Watch, which is sort of a mix between Baywatch and Lovecraftian horror. That was fucking delightful. So check all the archived shows at youtube.com/omniversalescapades. And that should do it. If you want to reach Sophia, also email us. And get some traffic help. City planning type stuff. Traffic planning, is that what you do?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And any and all discussions of these books. So yeah, I think that'll do it. Do we have any good short quotes that would cap
I like the
this
very
episode?
end, the one that you had, but it's not part of it's a. I just thought it was funny when it's like, I need to sit down and draw a flow chart.
Yes. Cavillo.
Yeah, Cavillo flow chart.
Yeah, that's good. All right, I'll see you next time.
Yes. Hej då, ha det så bra.
Hado Hadasabra.
Yes.
Is that, did I say it right?
Yeah, pretty much. The first part sounded a little bit like singing or something, but the second part was better.
A huge thanks to James Lark of jameslark.co.uk for providing our wonderful theme song. Thank you, James.